I think it's time the dinosaurs made room for evolution. That was the sentence Brianna Ashford chose to end my 28-year career. She said it publicly. She said it coldly. And she said it smiling, in front of every person who had ever reported to me, without realizing she had just fired the only man standing between her company and an $850 million disaster. I did not shout. I did not argue. I reached into my jacket and checked my phone instead. In a little under an hour, two senior military officers were arriving for a classified briefing, and they were not coming to see Brianna. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who confused a title with talent, stay with me until the end of this one. And if stories where arrogance finally meets consequences are the kind you came here for, take a second to subscribe to Alex's Revenge Justice, because the moment her decision turned around on her is one you are going to want to see. My name is Nathan Hawthorne. I am 52 years old, a former Navy communications officer, and I spent 8 years in uniform before moving into defense contracting. For nearly 3 decades, I built systems designed to protect lives, national infrastructure, and people who would never once learn my name. That was never the point. The point was that the systems held. Yet there I sat, in a glass conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and new carpet, while Brianna paced at the front like she was delivering a keynote. She was 34, sharp, polished, and 3 months into a job her father had arranged. She called me outdated in front of my entire department. She used the word legacy the way other people use the word garbage. No one defended me. Michelle Carter from compliance stared into her cold coffee like the answer was floating somewhere at the bottom of the cup. Jerome Brooks, my old Navy colleague, clenched his jaw so hard I could see the muscle move, but he stayed silent. They were not cowards. They were doing the math. They knew that even a sympathetic glance in my direction might put them next on her list. Brianna announced my termination effective immediately and instructed human resources to escort me from the building. I closed my notebook. I tucked it under my arm. Every movement was slow and deliberate, because the Navy had taught me a long time ago that the fastest way to hand your opponent a weapon is to lose control in front of them. Brianna watched me, and I could see something flicker behind her eyes. Disappointment. She had prepared for a scene. She had braced herself for shouting, for begging, for me demanding an explanation she could publicly shoot down. What she had not prepared for was a man who simply gathered his things and said nothing. "Can I collect my things?" I asked. She blinked. "Human resources will escort you. That won't be necessary." I walked toward the door. The entire room stayed frozen. At the doorway, I stopped, turned, and looked back at her. "You should check who has clearance for what," I said, "before you make a decision like this." Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then I left before she could find a reply. The moment that door clicked shut, I heard the whole room exhale at once. Brianna probably told herself my warning was wounded pride, a bitter old man's last word on his way out. It was not pride. It was a fact she had not bothered to learn. Inside my jacket, my phone still glowed with the calendar entry. A classified briefing on a program called Sentinel Protocol, scheduled for 11:30. Senior officers from Joint Special Operations Command were already in their cars. They expected a briefing. They expected me to deliver it, and Brianna had just terminated the only person at the company authorized to be in that room. I rode the elevator down to the lobby with one small cardboard box under my arm. 28 years of work had been reduced to a chipped Navy mug, a photograph of my dog Cooper, and a thin folder of clearance documents that Brianna had never once opened. Around my neck, under my collar, hung a titanium security drive. It would not unlock without my fingerprint and a retinal scan, and any attempt to force it open would wipe its contents and trip a federal alert. To Brianna, I was already obsolete. To the Department of Defense, I was still the company's primary authorized custodian of an $850 million defense system. I checked the time, 10:52. I did not call anyone. I did not warn Brianna. I did not give human resources a chance to quietly reverse the paperwork. I just stood near the tall lobby windows, holding my box, and waited. At 11:26, the front doors opened. Two senior officers walked in, one Army, one Navy, both in dress uniforms with rows of ribbons across their chests. The receptionist sat up straight without thinking. Brianna had been hovering near the lobby, and she hurried forward with a bright, practiced smile, ready to take credit for work she could not begin to explain. The Army officer did not return the smile. "Where is Nathan Hawthorne?" he asked. Brianna's smile tightened at the corners. "Nathan is no longer with the company, but I've been fully briefed and I can handle whatever you need." The Navy officer turned his head away from her as if she had not spoken at all. "Is Mr. Hawthorne still in the building?" I stepped forward from beside the windows, the cardboard box still under my arm. "I'm right here." Both officers looked visibly relieved. Brianna looked like the floor had just been pulled out from under her heels. "Nathan," she said quickly, dropping her voice, "let's discuss this privately." "This is private," I said. "They're here for the Sentinel protocol briefing." The Army officer glanced at the box in my hands. "Were you on your way out?" "I was terminated about 40 minutes ago." The silence that spread across that lobby was a thing you could feel on your skin. The receptionist stopped typing. Two employees near the elevators went still. Even the security guard turned his head. Brianna forced out a small laugh. "It was an internal restructuring decision. I'm sure we can clear up any confusion." "There's no confusion," I said. "Sentinel is an $850 million defense grid contract. I designed its core architecture. I wrote its continuity protocols, and I am the sole cleared point of contact on the federal side." The two officers exchanged a single look that told me everything I needed to know. Then the Navy officer stepped to my side. "Mr. Hawthorne, we're ready when you are." I set my box down on the reception desk. "So am I." Behind us, Brianna's voice cracked sharper. "Wait, he doesn't work here anymore." The officers led me toward the secure corridor at the back of the building. Brianna followed, still trying to claw back control of a moment that had already left her hands. "I'm the director of strategy," she said. "I should be present for this." The Army officer did not answer her. At the security door, Brianna swiped her badge first. A red light flashed, access denied. She tried again, harder, as if force could change the verdict of a system. Another red light. Then I stepped forward and placed my badge against the reader. The light turned green, and the reinforced glass door slid open. Brianna stared at the panel. "There must be a mistake." "There isn't," I said. She moved toward the doorway, but the Navy officer raised one hand and stopped her without a word. "This area requires top-secret clearance," he said. "He was terminated," she insisted. "He has no authority here." I looked back at her through the open door. "My access comes from the Department of Defense," I said, "not from your job title." For the first time that morning, Brianna had nothing to say. The door began to close, and just before the glass sealed shut, I watched the truth finally reach her eyes. She had not removed an outdated employee. She had locked herself out of her own company's most valuable contract. A secure elevator carried us 3 floors underground. It demanded my badge, my thumbprint, and a retinal scan before it would even move. Down there were no motivational posters, no glass walls, no executives confusing strategy with competence. Just reinforced doors, biometric locks, and people who understood exactly what failure could cost. General Patricia Caldwell was waiting in the briefing room, 3 stars on her uniform, calm eyes, no wasted motion. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, "we heard there was a personnel issue upstairs." "I was terminated this morning, ma'am." Commander Daniel Vance slowly closed the classified folder in front of him. "Who did they assign as your replacement?" "No one with clearance." Caldwell's expression hardened. I laid out what Brianna had never bothered to learn before she fired me. I had designed Sentinel's core architecture. I had written its encryption layers. I had built its emergency fail-safes. And I served as the only federally approved point of contact. No one else at the company currently held all 3 at once: the program authority, the operational knowledge, and the active clearance. A federal emergency override existed, yes, but using it would trigger a formal security review and freeze normal operations cold. If I walked away, the company could still own the offices, the servers, and the paperwork. It simply could not legally operate Sentinel. Coldwell leaned forward. So the company just removed its only cleared program lead capable of maintaining operational continuity. Yes, ma'am. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then she opened the contract and turned it toward me, tapping one paragraph marked continuity provision. If operational security is threatened, she read, the Department of Defense may reassign the critical asset independent of the contractor. She looked up at me. Mr. Hawthorne, I don't think your company understands what it just lost. Commander Vance opened a second file. Inside were assessments from analysts who had tried to reconstruct my architecture from the outside. They had understood pieces, they had never understood the whole. The encryption chains, the shutdown protocols, the layered authorization paths, all of it depended on decisions I had made one at a time over nearly a decade. Coldwell did not flatter me. She just stated the situation plainly. If you leave, Sentinel becomes vulnerable. Washington will not allow that. So what happens next? That depends on you, she said. If you want to keep doing this work somewhere else, there are people in Washington prepared to open the door. It was the first real offer of my new life. And I did not take it, not yet. Years in defense had taught me to never negotiate while the other side is still discovering how badly it has miscalculated. I'll consider it, I said. 3 floors above me, Brianna's new era was already coming apart. While I sat underground with a 3-star general, Brianna was learning the price of her morning. In conference room B, the main Sentinel display showed 3 words and nothing else. Access denied. User unauthorized. She hammered at the keyboard as if anger could override federal encryption. Why isn't this loading? Sarah Bennett, the senior systems analyst, checked the interface twice before she answered. The Defense Department gateway won't recognize your credentials. I'm the director. Jerome stood against the back wall, arms folded. Job titles don't grant classified access, he said. Clearance does. Brianna spun toward him. Then transfer Nathan's permissions to me. You fired him, Jerome said, before anyone started a transfer protocol. The room went quiet. She grabbed her phone and called me. Down in the secure room, my screen lit up with her name. I let it ring. Commander Vance glanced at the phone. Need to take that? No, sir, just noise. Upstairs, she called again, then a third time. When I still did not answer, she ordered Jerome to bring up the backup environment. He did not move. The backup is encrypted, he said. Nathan holds the root authorization. Then break it. Michelle from compliance finally lifted her head from her cold coffee. You're asking us to force entry into a federal defense system, she said quietly. If we try that, the FBI could seal this building before sunrise. And there it was. For the first time, no one in that room was afraid of me. They were afraid of her. Jerome pushed off the wall. You want the truth? He said. Nathan never resisted change. He stopped this company from making expensive mistakes, quietly, over and over. Watch your tone, Brianna said. No, Jerome answered. You should have watched your decision. Michelle closed her laptop. Nathan built Sentinel's architecture after the security crisis in 2016. Every approval chain, every emergency lockout, every federal compliance safeguard came from him. Sarah nodded, almost against her will. He wrote the migration protocols your new module depends on, too. Around the table, the engineers began to glance at each other, and the fear in the room slowly changed direction. Brianna felt it shift. He was holding us back, she insisted. We need modern leadership. You fired the only person who could explain the system, Jerome said, and you did it on a stage without ever checking his clearance, his contract, or his federal responsibilities. One of the younger engineers quietly pulled up my professional history on his screen. Navy Communications Officer, 28 years in defense, multiple classified programs. Within a minute, 3 more people at the table were reading the same thing. Brianna slapped her palm against the table. Enough. We are moving forward without him. Nobody answered her. For years, they had believed her title made her powerful. Now they finally understood the truth. Brianna controlled the conference room. I controlled everything that actually mattered outside of it. She refused to accept it. Find another route, she ordered. Clone his credentials. Reset the authorization chain. Do whatever it takes. No one moved. Michelle's voice was flat now. Those credentials are tied to Nathan's biometric identity and his federal clearance. They cannot be copied. Then override the system. That would be an unauthorized intrusion into classified infrastructure. She turned to Jerome. You're the development lead. Break through it. Jerome looked at her for a long, slow moment. The backup network is built to detect forced access. Nathan designed it that way. One wrong attempt could lock every endpoint, erase the keys, and alert multiple federal agencies at once. You're exaggerating. I'm not. Sarah rotated her laptop so Brianna could read the warning glowing on her screen. Any attempt to bypass root authorization would be logged as suspected data tampering. Michelle said it carefully, like she was reading a man his rights. If we keep going after seeing that notice, this stops being a technical problem. It becomes a criminal investigation. The confidence finally drained out of Brianna's face. For the first time, she understood that her authority ended exactly where federal law began. She stared at the phone in her hand. Then she called me again. Downstairs. I watched her name appear on my screen, and I declined the call. She had humiliated me in front of the entire department only a few hours earlier. Now she needed the man she had called obsolete, and that man was no longer available to rescue her. By late afternoon, she had called me 7 times. She tried my office line, my personal phone, and then she had human resources send a message claiming my termination paperwork was incomplete. I ignored all of it. This was not pride. It was discipline. For years, I had quietly fixed every crisis before senior management ever noticed there was one, and Brianna had mistaken that silence for weakness. Now she was finding out what happens when I stop protecting people from their own decisions. At 4:12, Jerome texted me. She's offering promotions to anyone who can restore access. Nobody can. A minute later, Michelle, legal is asking who approved your termination. Brianna says HR did. HR says Brianna bypassed them. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. General Coldwell had handed me something far more valuable than revenge. She had handed me options. The company needed me immediately. Washington wanted me permanently. For the first time in 28 years, I did not have to prove my worth to anyone in the room. That evening, I got home a little after 6, fed Cooper, and made coffee strong enough to keep my head clear. Then, I pulled out an old notebook I had kept since 2019. On one page, beneath a faded brown coffee stain, were 2 words in my own handwriting: exit plan. I started it years earlier, back when the company first began swapping experienced engineers for executives who cared more about slide decks than about safeguards. I never wanted to use it, but the Navy teaches you to map your way out before the situation ever turns dangerous. The plan was mostly names, people I trusted. Alicia Porter, one of the finest cyber defense specialists I had ever trained. Jerome, who understood Sentinel's bones better than anyone alive except me. Michelle, who knew every compliance rule Brianna had trampled on her way to the stage. Beneath them, a dozen more engineers, analysts, and security people who valued the mission over the masthead. I sent Alicia a single message. You still interested in building something clean? No politics, no shortcuts. Her reply came back in under a minute. Absolutely. When do we start? I looked at the other names, and I started making quiet calls. I did not promise anyone revenge. I promised meaningful work, honest leadership, and a system built correctly from the foundation up. By midnight, 5 people had said yes, and for the first time since Brianna fired me, I caught myself smiling. She thought she had ended my career. What she had actually done was give me permission to build the team I should have had all along. Have you ever watched someone get fired and quietly understood the company just made the worst mistake of the year? Tell me in the comments whether you would have answered her calls or let every single one ring out. And if you want to see exactly how far her decision dragged her down, subscribe to Alex's Revenge Justice and stay with me, because the consequences were only getting started. By the next morning, the answer was moving quietly through people I trusted. Alicia reached Jerome. Jerome reached Michelle. Within hours, former teammates were asking each other the same question. Was Nathan really building something new? I gave every one of them the same honest answer. Yes, but only if the mission comes before ego. I was not recruiting angry people. Anger burns out. I wanted the ones who had stayed professional while incompetent executives ignored their warnings. Engineers who checked their work twice. Analysts who understood that a single careless shortcut could one day cost a life. The people Brianna had treated as replaceable because they did not speak in corporate slogans. By noon, all 5 were still committed. By evening, 8 more had asked me to call them, the moment the plan was official. Not one of them asked whether Brianna would suffer. They asked about security requirements, timelines, and what exactly we would be protecting. That told me I had chosen right. The company still had its expensive offices, its executive titles, and its polished presentations. But the people who actually understood Sentinel were already halfway out the door. Brianna had not simply fired one man. She had snapped the loyalty that held her entire operation together, and she did not even know it yet. By Friday morning, the cracks were no longer hidden inside conference rooms. Brianna's celebrated new module failed its integration test. It did not just return an error. It crashed the entire test environment and locked 3 engineering teams out of the servers. The developers traced the failure to outdated endpoints, the exact ones I had replaced during a migration the previous year. "Where is the migration documentation?" Brianna demanded. Sarah hesitated. "In the classified documentation vault." "Then open it. It requires Nathan's biometric authorization." Brianna's jaw went tight. At 8:42, a certified letter arrived from the Department of Defense, sealed and requiring 2 signatures before core legal could even open the envelope. Inside was a formal notice of project lead noncompliance. The company had failed to maintain an authorized operational lead for Sentinel protocol. It now had 72 hours to restore continuity or face a full contract review. By 9:15, the chief financial officer was standing in Brianna's office with the letter crushed in his fist. "You told us Nathan was replaceable." "He is," she insisted. "The system is just resisting modernization." "The system isn't resisting anything," he said. "The Pentagon rejected both of your reassignment requests." By lunchtime, the board had called an emergency meeting. For the first time, Brianna was not presenting her vision for the company's future. She was being asked to explain how one arrogant decision had put an $850 million contract in danger. Monday brought the notice everyone had been dreading. The 72-hour window had closed without an acceptable continuity plan. The Department of Defense was placing Sentinel protocol under formal contract review and suspending the company's authority to make any further personnel changes. Unless a federally approved program lead was restored immediately, the $850 million contract would be terminated, and the company could be barred from bidding on future federal work entirely. By 10 o'clock, 8 directors, 4 attorneys, and 2 human resources executives were crowded into the boardroom. Brianna sat at the far end, defending herself while everyone around the table quietly calculated how much her decision was going to cost them personally. "This is temporary," she said. "We can certify someone else." Legal shook his head. "The Pentagon has rejected every replacement we've offered." The chief financial officer laid both hands flat on the table. "If we lose Sentinel, we lose nearly 60% of our federal revenue." That silenced the room. Then Richard Ashford, the company's chairman and Brianna's own father, finally turned to look at his daughter. "You assured this board that Nathan Hawthorne was outdated and unnecessary." "He resisted my strategy. He held the clearance that kept this company eligible to operate." No one defended her. The same directors who had applauded her promises of disruption only weeks ago were now demanding accountability. And then someone offered the only realistic solution left. "Call Nathan." Every face at the table turned toward the chief financial officer. For the first time, Brianna understood that saving the company would mean begging the man she had publicly humiliated. He called me at 10:17 that morning, I was in my home office going over the list of people ready to join me, when the company's number lit up my phone. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. Hawthorne. Nathan, it's Bill Henderson. We need to talk about what happened. What happened was pretty clear. He paused. The board believes there may have been a misunderstanding. We'd like you back as a senior consultant, full access restored. You can name your compensation. I almost laughed. A week earlier, Brianna had called me obsolete in front of my own people. Now the company was offering me a blank check to pretend it never happened. I'm not interested. Nathan, please. Sentinel is critical to this company. It was critical before you fired me. He lowered his voice. We could give you complete operational authority. You should have done that while I still worked there. He tried one last question. Are you considering another position? I'm already in discussions. With whom? I'm not authorized to say. The silence on his end told me the board had finally understood how far beyond their reach this had moved. I appreciate the call, I said. Good luck. And I hung up. 30 seconds later, a message arrived from a Washington number. General Caldwell requests your presence Thursday at 1400 hours. Pentagon. I confirmed immediately. The company wanted me back to save its profits. Washington wanted me to protect the mission. The choice had already made itself. Thursday afternoon, I walked into the Pentagon in a navy blue suit. General Caldwell was waiting with 2 senior officers. No small talk, no slogans. She went straight to it. Sentinel protocol is too important to stay under a contractor that does not understand what it owns. One officer slid a folder across the table. We want you to finish what you started under direct Department of Defense authority. I opened it. The position was Deputy Director of Critical Defense Infrastructure, civilian, equivalent to an 06, a $600 million operating budget. Authority to handpick a 15-person team. Sentinel would transfer from the company to federal control, and I would run it. What happens to the company? I asked. If they cooperate, they may keep some limited support work. If they resist, the contract is terminated. And Brianna Ashford? Caldwell's answer was instant. She will have no involvement whatsoever. I looked down at the offer. The company had tried to buy my return because it feared losing money. These people wanted me because they understood the mission. Still, I did not sign right away. I had spent years watching executives ruin good work by interfering with it. So before I shook a single hand, I made my terms clear. If I take this, I said, I choose the team and I control how Sentinel is rebuilt. You select every member, Caldwell said, without hesitation. No political appointments, no one forcing unqualified people into technical roles. I want engineers, analysts, and security specialists chosen on competence and nothing else. Agreed. And I need real operational authority. Monthly reviews are fine, but I will not have a committee sitting on a critical decision while the threat keeps moving. You'll report directly to me, she said. The mission will be yours to run. I glanced at the other 2 officers. Neither objected. One more thing, I said. Some of the people I trust still work at the company. I want them allowed to apply through the proper federal process. Caldwell closed the folder. Anyone who applies will be evaluated on merit and cleared through standard security procedures. That was enough. I stood and put out my hand. Then we have a deal. She shook it firmly. Welcome aboard, Deputy Director Hawthorne. You start Monday. Walking out of that building, I felt lighter than I had in years. Brianna had tried to erase 28 years of service with one speech. Instead, she had set me free from a company that no longer deserved my loyalty. Before I even reached the parking lot, I messaged Jerome. I'm putting the team back together. Are you in? His answer came back in seconds. Absolutely. Tell me when. Alicia answered next, then Michelle. Then 12 more. By the time I reached my car, 15 people had agreed to submit applications. I had promised none of them a position. Every one of them would still have to earn the clearance. Brianna had fired one man, and she had unknowingly sent the entire heart of her operation out the door behind him. That evening, the chairman emailed me. Nathan, the board formally requests your return in a consulting capacity. Full authority, competitive compensation. Please reconsider. I read it twice, then typed a short reply. I appreciate the offer, but I have accepted another position. I wish the company clarity in the days ahead. 17 minutes later, the board called an emergency video meeting. Brianna appeared on screen while directors argued about federal penalties, falling stock, and the engineers already preparing their resignations. She kept insisting the company could still recover. Her father finally cut her off. "You're done." The room went silent. She stared at him. "What?" "Resign immediately, or the board will terminate you." She tried to blame legacy systems, resistant employees, poor communication. No one listened. Every excuse circled back to the same fact. She had fired the one person holding the company's most valuable contract together. The call ended without giving her another chance to speak. By Friday afternoon, the company released a polished statement announcing that Brianna was stepping down for personal reasons. There was no mention of her humiliation. No mention of me. But everyone inside that building knew exactly why she was gone. Monday morning, I arrived at the Pentagon before sunrise. By 8 o'clock, Jerome, Alicia, Michelle, and several of my provisional team were seated in a secure briefing room. The rest were finishing federal hiring and clearance reviews. No glass walls, no motivational posters. Just concrete classified systems and people who understood why the work mattered. I stood at the front. Sentinel protocol is now under Department of Defense control. We're rebuilding it from the ground up. New servers, new encryption, new authorization chains. No shortcuts. Jerome leaned in. Timeline? 6 months to full operational capability. Budget is $600 million. Alicia raised a hand. What role does the company have? For now, limited transition support. Their contract authority is suspended and final termination is under review. Michelle allowed herself a small, quiet smile. For the next 4 hours, we worked through architecture, threats, and emergency protocols. Everyone contributed. No one was waved off because of their age, their title, or someone else's ego. By the end of that first week, we had solved problems the company's leadership had been delaying for months. And that was when I finally understood what Brianna had actually given me. She had not destroyed my career. She had torn down the walls that had been keeping me from doing my best work. While my team rebuilt Sentinel, the company kept collapsing under the weight of one decision. The Department of Defense formally terminated the contract and demanded a $200 million settlement for security and continuity violations. The stock lost nearly half its value in a single day. Investors demanded answers. Senior engineers resigned in waves. The chairman, Richard Ashford, stepped down after the board blamed his leadership for letting his daughter control a program she never understood. They appointed an interim chief executive and opened talks with creditors, but no leadership change could bring back the contract or the trust that left with it. The news reports described leadership failures and compliance problems, and they never once mentioned my name. That was fine. I had never wanted headlines. One evening, Michelle showed me the company's latest public announcement. "They're changing everything," she said. I closed the message, except what mattered. They had changed the executives, the logo, and the public story. They could not replace the experience, the trust, and the talent that had walked out the door with me. 6 months later, Sentinel Protocol reached full operational capability. The rebuilt system protected power grids, satellite communications, emergency networks, and military response channels across the country. It passed every required penetration test. Every simulated attack was detected and contained long before it ever reached the protected core. The Secretary of Defense presented our team with a formal commendation at the Pentagon. I stood beside Jerome, Alicia, Michelle, and the 12 others who had followed me out. None of them had come for titles, and none of them had come for revenge. They came because the work mattered. That night, we gathered at a quiet bar near Arlington. Jerome raised his glass to Nathan for refusing to crawl back. I shook my head and lifted mine. To the team for choosing the mission when staying silent would have been easier. Around 10, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I did not recognize. It was Brianna. She said she was sorry. She admitted she had been in over her head, that I had been right, and that she hoped I was doing well. For just a moment, I considered answering. I could have reminded her exactly how small she had once tried to make me feel. Instead, I deleted the message. I did not need her apology anymore. Revenge was never going to be watching her lose everything. Revenge was standing in that room beside people I trusted, protecting something that mattered, and realizing that being fired had carried me exactly where I belonged. Later that night, I sat on my back porch with Cooper at my feet, and I thought about the morning she fired me. She had mistaken age for weakness and silence for irrelevance. But experience does not vanish because an arrogant executive refuses to see it. For 28 years, I had built systems to protect people, not to protect my title or my salary. Now I had a team that understood the same thing. Brianna believed power meant deciding who stays and who goes. I had learned that real power is carrying your value with you and putting it down somewhere it can finally matter. At 52, I finally understood that winning rarely looks the way people expect. It is not always watching your enemy fall or landing the perfect last word. Sometimes winning means walking out quietly, taking your experience with you, and building something no one can ever take away. She called me a dinosaur because she confused age with weakness. In the end, she lost her position, her influence, and the company her father had spent years protecting. I gained a team I trusted, full authority over the system I created, and the chance to serve something larger than any company. I would not change a single part of it. Her cruelty pushed me through a door I had been too loyal to open myself. So if someone ever tries to make you feel outdated, replaceable, or small, remember this: their opinion does not decide your worth. What you build next does. If Nathan's quiet victory hit harder than any loud, angry revenge, tell me in the comments who you've watched get exactly what they had coming, and subscribe to Alex's Revenge Justice for more stories where betrayal meets consequences and the people everyone underestimated take back their power. I was never obsolete. I was just building my future in the wrong place.